Emo. Emotional hardcore. Tight jeans and floppy fringes. Grown men who never got over their girlfriend breaking up with them in 7th grade. You know the drill. There are plenty of stereotypes around what emo is all about. But today, we're going deeper. We're examining what's really going on with the genre by exploring its hidden depths. This is the Emo Iceberg, a top-to-bottom look at the rich universe of the emo genre and emo culture in general. We'll start by checking out some of the better-known stuff, the emo style, the defining bands of the genre, and the social media platforms that helped foster a global subculture. Then we'll be plunging deeper into the emo ocean. We'll be checking out the feuds that ripped the scene apart, the subgenres and international bands that added new dimensions to emo, and the cultural figures and unsung heroes that made it all happen. On the way, we'll meet some of the greatest bands that hardly anyone ever got to hear. And yes, there will be a few pairs of tight jeans, and some floppy fringes thrown in too. So let's get into it. This is the Emo Iceberg. We're starting right at the beginning. This is the stuff you know about, the stereotypical stuff, the cliché, but stuff that has become intrinsic to the genre we all know and love. These are the things that make emo what it is, the style and aesthetic, the moody, angsty vibe, and, of course, the great music. Let's begin our journey into all things emo. There's no getting away from it. The emo style is one of the best-known things about the genre. Tight jeans, eyeliner, black nail polish, Hot Topic bought clothes. There's a definite look to emo, especially early 2000s emo. There's certainly a gothic influence to emo style, but emo and goth are inherently different. Sure, there's plenty of moody, dark hues, but there are splashes of vibrant color too. Look at bands like Rocket and Iron Fist, two staples of the emo wardrobe for a while. Both use cutesy pinks and blues and dramatic blood reds against darker backdrops. Older emos were a little more restrained in their attire. Their look was something that the younger generation might call normcore. Striped polos, cardigans, woolen sweaters. These were all key to the early 90s emo aesthetic. Some emos felt this whole thing was a bit passé, a bit juvenile. Others wore their style as a badge of honor, enjoying the funny looks they got from passers-by. But let's be honest, we all went there at one point or another, at least to some extent. With the whole style thing out of the way, what about the music? My Chemical Romance are perhaps the biggest of all the emo bands. They've got the look, and they've got the tunes to back it up. Dashboard Confessional, the project of Chris Carrabba from Further Seems Forever, helped to kickstart the emo revolution of the early 2000s. DC's MTV Unplugged album showed the world how intimate and transformative an emo show can be. And Fall Out Boy too, especially Pete Wentz. Back in the day, you either wanted him or you wanted to be him, or maybe both. Panic at the Disco are maybe the outsiders here. They ended up leaving emo behind for a while, exploring a new sound reminiscent of the Kinks' own progressive rock aspirations. But they're definitely one of the first names that spring to mind when most people think of the genre. Okay, here's another thing we can't get away from: the emo vibe. For a while, emo became a byword for moody teen angst and my mom just doesn't understand me stroppiness. This is definitely unfair. There's way more to emo than just dressing in black and frowning all the time. But if we really love the genre, we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves a bit. After all, when someone overhears you listening to Jeff Rickley from Thursdays singing "Is This How It Feels?" when you don't even fit into your own skin, it's definitely giving off a certain moody vibe. So, let's just embrace it. Tattoos almost fit into the emo style section of the iceberg, but really they need a whole section of their own. After all, you can change a t-shirt and you can buy some baggier pants, but a tattoo is for life. Or, at least until you can pay to get it lasered. Think about some of the biggest emo icons out there. Pete Wentz, Travis Barker, Burt McCracken, Chris Carrabba. Could you imagine these guys without tattoos? Ink has become part of their whole vibe. And how about the lyrical content of emo? It's perfect for tattooing. Maybe you've even got some emo lyrics on your skin yourself. Let me know in the comments if you do. The social media age is supposed to be something new, something associated with Gen Z or whatever comes after Gen Z. But it's not. It's way older than that. One of the first of the massive social media platforms, MySpace, was launched in 2003. It's officially old enough to drink. MySpace was the digital destination for emos in the mid to late 2000s. A whole generation of kids basically learned HTML so they could create their own crazy backgrounds and visuals for their profiles. And then there was the theme song to that profile, the piece of music that would play when anyone visited your page. Choosing this track was a fine art. It had to represent you, and it had to be cool. An album track from a voguish, maybe slightly obscure band was just perfect. Somewhere out there in cyberspace, there's still probably a bunch of old MySpace pages playing aka M80 the Wolf off the first Portugal the Man album, or Portrait by Matchbook Romance for whoever clicks on them. Only no one ever does. There are movies about emo kids, but that's not really what we're looking at here. Instead, we're considering movies that help to capture a mood, an aesthetic, an outlook on the world. Think Twilight with its supernatural vampiric elements combined with teen romantic drama in a small town in the Pacific Northwest. Or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a quirky, moody tale of a heartbroken young couple who just want to forget their past. Movies like A Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, and Edward Scissorhands gave emos some stylistic inspiration for their own goth-influenced looks. The quirky, offbeat humor and outsider characters of early Wes Anderson movies like Rushmore and The Royal Tenenbaums resonated with emos, while The Garden State, Ghost World, and Juno also became key examples of emo-adjacent cinema. And of course, Donnie Darko. I've got a whole other video about this one, and I urge you to check it out once you're finished with the Emo Iceberg. Now we've taken Emo 101. We're ready for something a bit more advanced. Not too much more advanced, just a little bit. This is where we start getting into the biggest emo subgenres and the bands that turned emo into a global phenomenon. We're touching on some of emo's most serious feuds too. In fact, let's start with those. This is me with the words on the tip of my tongue and my eye through the scope down the barrel of a gun, sings Taking Back Sunday's Adam Lazzara. And you can think of me when you forget your seatbelt, and again when your head goes through the windshield, sings Brand New's Jesse Lacey. And guess what? The two bands were singing about each other. That's right, for a few years back in the early 2000s, Taking Back Sunday and Brand New really hated one another. It all stemmed from when John Nolan got with Jesse Lacey's girlfriend at a party, back when they were still TBS bandmates. Jesse left the band, formed Brand New, and the rest is history. This is a seriously confusing tale. To really get to grips with just what went on, check out my video on the beef after you're done with this one. Back at the beginning of the millennium, Chris Carrabba found himself with a choice to make. He could continue with his band, Further Seems Forever, one of the bright lights of the emo scene. Or he could make the leap into the unknown, going it alone with a new project. He chose the latter option, and in doing so, he helped lay the groundwork for a whole new era of emo. With Dashboard Confessional, Chris Carrabba explored just how intimate, engaging, and personally resonant emo could be. On record, DC's songs are beautiful pieces of art. Tracks like Hands Down and Screaming Infidelities are some of the best known and best loved emo songs of all time. But on stage, in a live setting, these songs really shift up a gear. Witnessing Dashboard Confessional live is almost like a religious experience, as fans reflect on the impact the music has had on their own lives and sing every word back to their heroes. Many bands and artists have tried to follow in Dashboard's footsteps, but few had done it quite so well as Chris Carrabba and his DC bandmates. This is another fascinating story from the emo vaults, and something else I've covered in another video. Take a look after this one's done. Emo and screamo are not the same, but they're often considered to be the same. Maybe it's because of the emotional catharsis involved with screamo. It's all of the vulnerability and fragility of emo, but dialed up to 11. At some point in the mid-2000s, screamo sort of took over the emo scene. You still had bands like Death Cab and Jimmy Eat World doing that 90s emo thing, and doing it insanely well. But you had a load of newer bands too. Silverstein, Hawthorne Heights, Finch, Alexis on Fire, and British bands like Funeral for a Friend and Bring Me the Horizon. And of course, the group that really introduced screamo to the wider audience, Taking Back Sunday, with their incredible record, Tell All Your Friends. A band so important I devoted a whole video to them. The raw-throated extremism of these bands, coupled with the melodic sensitivity of earlier emo, added a whole new dynamic to the sound. So, while emo and screamo are not necessarily the same thing, the screamo movement has helped shape what emo is today. In the early 2000s, Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance and Burt McCracken of The Used were two of emo's titans. They were also good friends, bonded by their shared love of performance, artistry, and music. They even collaborated together on a cover of the David Bowie and Queen track Under Pressure, until they had a falling out. In 2005, McCracken said, "I'd prefer not to say anything about My Chemical Romance. We don't speak anymore. We used to be very close, but no more. The mystery of the falling out puzzled fans. Some believed professional rivalry was to blame. Others believed the roots of the feud lay in drug abuse and the struggle for sobriety. I'm going to try to shed some light on this in a future video, so stay tuned for that one. Emo has taken significant flack from all sides over the last couple of decades. Punk bands, supposed kindred spirits with emos, have talked trash about the genre, most notably during runs of the Warped Tour during the 2000s. Emo has also been the target of moral and media panic. British tabloid newspapers attacked bands like My Chemical Romance in the late 2000s, describing them as glamorizing and even promoting mental health issues and suicide. After a desperately tragic incident in 2008, in which 13-year-old fan Hannah Bond took her own life, the Daily Mail went as far as calling MCR a suicide cult. MCR and other emo bands have been very vocal about offering supportive communities and safe spaces for those who feel alienated or othered by society. And these musicians have undoubtedly helped thousands of fans in their very darkest moments. Of course, for the tabloid media eager to sell newspapers, this didn't matter. The anger against emo has helped to galvanize the scene. Emo has always been music made by outsiders for outsiders. If media outlets and other musicians are going to take potshots at emo, then the emo community is just going to get stronger as a result. It doesn't matter where you're from. We're all human beings. We're all subject to the same feelings, the same struggles, the same emotions. And so emo is for us all. It makes sense then that there are great emo bands from right across the world, not just here in North America. Across the pond in the UK, Northern Ireland's Jet Plane Landing, Wales's Funeral for a Friend, and Scotland's Biffy Clyro made era-defining music for generations of emo kids. Germany's 125 Rue Montmartre, Finland's Disco Ensemble, and Italy's Rain all added their own contributions to the genre. Elsewhere, South Korea's Hollow Jan, India's Little Wales, Russia's Marshak, The Getaway Plan from Australia, and Zeta from Venezuela showed the world how emo can be done. And this is just a tiny drop in a vast ocean. Wherever you are, there's probably an emo scene right on your doorstep. Now we're right in the heart of the monster, what's really grappling with the intricacies and hidden depths of emo. So what's in store? We're kicking off this layer with a look at one of the most influential labels in the history of emo, and the point at which emo and pop-punk intersect. We've got more subgenres down here too, as bands and artists took emo to new and exciting places. And we've got a track that really redefined what was possible with the genre, introducing new instrumentation, new structures, and new levels of potential. It's all here, at the middle of the iceberg. This is where we cross over with another one of my iceberg videos, the pop-punk iceberg. After all, pop-punk and emo ain't so different. Drive-Thru Records was started by the brother and sister team of Richard and Stephanie Rains, and the label united pop-punk and emo like never before. Newfound Glory, one of Drive-Thru's most successful bands, have become one of the defining artists of pop-punk in recent years. But there's a definite emo tinge to their sound. And the starting line? They definitely lean heavily on the emo side of things. Once we factor in artists like Finch, Dashboard Confessional, Hidden in Plain View, and Senses Fail, we can see a real pattern emerging here. Drive-Thru was a genuine launching pad for the great and the good of early 2000s emo talent, and the legacy remains strong to this day. How do you make an emo band? You need a singer for sure, and you need a guitarist, bass player, drummer. Well, actually, perhaps you don't need those things. When Death Cab for Cutie's Ben Gibbard and Jimmy Tamborello of Dentel put together the Postal Service, they used digital programming and electronic beats to create their soundscapes. Bringing in Rilo Kiley's Jenny Lewis on vocals, the Postal Service recorded Give Up in 2003, a stunningly beautiful album that blew the boundaries of emo wide open. Other artists would lean more heavily on the pop potential of this new brand of emo. Owl City, for example, who ended up having a hit single with Carly Rae Jepsen, Metro Station featuring Miley Cyrus's brother Trace, and Hello Goodbye, who scored Drive-Thru's biggest ever hit with their single Here in Your Arms. Plenty of artists gave electro-emo a try, but no one did it quite so well as the Postal Service. Something corporate never quite fit with the broader scene. Don't get me wrong, they were scene stalwarts loved by everyone, but musically they were doing something a little different. This was partly due to the piano. By mastering this other instrument, they were able to add a whole new texture and sound to the emo playbook. This is something I explore in depth in my Something Corporate video, but there was more to it than this. Something Corporate were genuine artists, ready to throw off any shackles the scene, the genre, or the music industry as a whole placed upon them. Constantine is a stunning example of this. With this track, the band went all out, crafting a stunningly fragile and yet powerful ballad, clocking in at over 9 minutes long. It's a fan favorite, both on record and in the band's exceptional live show. And it's an example of just what's possible when emo punks think outside the box. Maybe a few years ago, Midwest emo could have been way down in the depths of this particular berg. But the recent emergence of the Midwest emo social media trend has launched it here, somewhere in the middle. Midwest emo is really just any emo from the Midwest United States. This is where proto-emo stalwarts like The Replacements and Husker Du came from, so it's an important place in the history of the genre. But more recently, Midwest emo has gained a more specific definition. Typically, we're talking clean guitars and arpeggiated chords, and crucially, sample dialogue from a movie or TV show that reflects the tone and content of the song. Other genres do this too. Pop punk is really good at it. Think Good Riddance sampling The Breakfast Club and the Atari sampling Clerks. But it was obscure emo bands that really perfected the art. Bands like Penfold, who sampled the movie Jacob's Ladder, One Night Stand in North Dakota sampling The Office, and the brilliantly knowing Midwest Pen Pals sampling Juno. It's become a bit of a cliché, but when it's done right, it sounds incredible. From 2003 to 2007, teen TV show The O.C. was everywhere, but the story of privileged high school kids encountering drama in a California beach town is nothing new. And there was nothing particularly emo about The O.C., except for one character, Seth. Played by Adam Brody, Seth from The O.C. became a bit of an emo icon. He was supposed to be the socially awkward dork, but actually Seth comes across as kind of cool. He's into Death Cab for Cutie and classic literature and skateboarding and comic books. The O.C. is not The Sopranos or The Wire or The West Wing. It's not making it onto the list of anyone's favorite shows, except maybe as a guilty pleasure. But for a while, Adam Brody and his character Seth sort of became the mainstream's window into the emo subculture. Folk and emo feel like they should be worlds apart. But actually, there's a whole lot of crossover. The whole Omaha, Nebraska scene of the late 1990s has given us Bright Eyes, Cursive, and The Good Life. 3 examples of what happens when indie folk gets super emotive. Few emo kids haven't got at least one Conor Oberst record in their collection. Whether it's a Mystic Valley Band record, a Bright Eyes record, or something by the more post-hardcore sounding Desaparecidos. Rilo Kiley from LA are very much adjacent to this scene, creating stripped-back, lo-fi records that are both very folky and very, very emo. Frontwoman Jenny Lewis even dabbles in a bit of screamo herself on Jenny You're Barely Alive. We haven't seen the last of folk emo in the iceberg. Look out for another example of the subgenre later on. We're not quite at the deepest part of the iceberg yet, but we're definitely getting pretty obscure. Don't worry, there's still plenty of fun to be had on our emo journey. We're going to be looking at the scene and the ethos that kickstarted the entire genre, and examine the bands that influenced emo without ever actually being emo themselves. We're seeing just what happens when emo bands really embrace their hardcore side, or maybe when hardcore bands embrace their emo side. But we're kicking it all off with a sprawling fantasy universe spanning 10 albums, 32 comic books, and a whole host of graphic novels. Coheed and Cambria weren't content to sing about heartache and low self-esteem. They were, but they wanted to sing about these themes in a far grander way. Led by Claudio Sanchez, Coheed and Cambria created the Amory Wars universe, a cinematic sci-fi fantasy epic which was like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and the MCU, set to a rocking emo, punk, and metal soundtrack. From 2002 to 2025, and probably way beyond this, the band have been building this sprawling story of love, loss, redemption, and retribution. That's 10 whole albums worth of content. Only 2015's The Color Before the Sun is not based in the Amory Wars universe. Of course, Claudio and his bandmates are artists. There's plenty of personal stuff in there too, and some political stuff. But as an exercise in world building, it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's great music too. You don't need to know who the Good Eye Sniper is, or who scribbled the words on the walls with the loss of friends they didn't have. You can just enjoy the fact that A Favor House Atlantic is one of the best pop emo tracks ever recorded. There's a stereotype about emo, that it's soft, fragile, unstable. Maybe there's some truth in that. Emo is all about embracing that vulnerability after all. But remember, emo stemmed from hardcore, and hardcore can be absolutely brutal. which means emo can be brutal too. Take Florida's Poison the Well. Tracks like Nerdy and Botchla feature some sparkling melodies, but there's also a whole lot of punishing metal rhythm and powerful hardcore vocals from Jeffrey Morera. And Converge, with The Saddest Day, The Broken Vow, My Unsaid Everything, and Farewell Note to the City, Converge became fully fledged emo kids. Their music charts the pain and anguish of vocalist Jacob Bannon, but is positioned at the extreme end of the emo spectrum. Converge's infusion of emo with the very heaviest elements of Boston hardcore is truly something to behold. The Misfits? As in Glenn Danzig Misfits. As in Static Age, Earth AD Misfits. They're not remotely emo. No, they're not. But few non-emo bands have had the influence on the genre that the Misfits have. Take that grinning skull logo, for example. How many times have you seen that emblazoned on a tee or tattooed onto someone's skin? It's a classic emo visual. Bands who embrace the goth horror side of emo owe a heavy debt to the New Jersey punks. Alkaline Trio, AFI, and My Chemical Romance have all name-checked those early Misfits records as hugely influential. Not so many bands cite later Misfits records as quite so influential. Funny that. But it's not just these gothic bands who have taken cues from Danzig, Jerry Only, and the rest of the Misfits crew. Superchunk have professed their love for the band, while Texas is the reason take their name from a line from Misfits' track Bullet. Emo? No. Honorary members of the scene? Definitely. Bands are like families, and family members tend to grow up, get married, and have families of their own. That's how you end up with Matt Skiba of Alkaline Trio in Blink-182, and Josh Freese from the Vandals in, well, just about everyone. But deep down at the heart of the Emo Iceberg, you've got some incredible lineages. Musicians who played in a ton of bands, and killed it in every single one. How about Jonah Matranga? He pioneered the emo sound with Far, but also achieved incredible things with one-line drawing, New and Original, and Gratitude. And hardcore visionary Walter Schreifels, with Gorilla Biscuits, Youth of Today, Quicksand, and Rival Schools on his resume. And last but certainly not least, Mike Kinsella. Cap and Jazz, American Football, Owen, Joan of Arc, to name but a few. No one puts the art and inventiveness into emo quite like Mike. Hats off to one of the best ever to do it. For lots of musical genres, it's kind of hard to chart that early history. It's hard to identify where it all began. For emo, it's not so difficult. The answer is 1985, the Revolution Summer. By 1985, some of hardcore's progenitors had grown a little tired with the violence and toxicity of the whole thing. What had begun as something amazing was running out of steam. There was always an element of danger and malice at a hardcore show, but that had devolved into macho mindlessness. While the scene had once been a place for misfits to be themselves, it had become just another arena for racist, sexist, homophobic thuggery, and it was seriously unsustainable. But something big was happening in Washington, D.C. Hardcore influence bands like Rites of Spring, Embrace, and Dag Nasty were exploring a more thoughtful, more positive type of expression. This excited hardcore legend Ian MacKaye of Minor Threat. Within a year, he and Guy Picciotto of Rites of Spring had formed Fugazi, and a whole new genre of emotional hardcore, emo, was taking its first steps. This wasn't emo as we know it today, but that crazy summer back in 1985 helped pave the way for the bands that would follow. What do we do with Me Without You? Too big to put at the bottom of the iceberg, but too gloriously weird to feature near the surface. Me Without You have skirted the fringes of the emo scene for years, and have released some stunning records in the process. Originally part of the same Christian metalcore movement as Norma Jean, Zao, and The Chariot, Me Without You were never quite as heavy as their scene mates. Instead, vocalist Aaron Weiss preferred to let his brooding, intelligent lyrics shine on through, with a clear delivery. In 2009, the band released It's All Crazy, It's All False, It's All a Dream, It's All Right, an album that saw them expand their sound into folk and indie rock. From here, the only thing that could stop the band was the band themselves. In 2022, Me Without You officially split up, leaving behind some of the most astounding emo, or at least emo-adjacent, records ever made. We're down at the deepest point of the iceberg now, where the pressure of the ocean crushes everything into drop D tuning. There's some great stuff to explore down here. Bands who became seriously influential but only after they broke up. British indie artists who influenced the style, the mood, and the vibe of the genre. Records that took emo experimentation to whole new levels. And vocalists who blew out their vocal cords with just too much screaming. Let's get to it. This is level 5 of the iceberg. Jerome's Dream are one of those bands who didn't get a whole lot of attention while they were around, but became super influential after they broke up. In December 1999, the Connecticut screamo pioneers recorded their first LP, Seeing Means More Than Safety, in 2 days, releasing it the following year and touring it relentlessly. Another LP, Presence, followed in 2001, but Jerome's Dream broke up pretty soon after that. Along with Page 99, Orchid, and Seisha, Jerome's Dream left a lasting impression on the scene that would follow, and their shows became the stuff of legend. Amazingly, all 4 bands have since reformed. Seisha returned in 2022 after a 23-year absence, while Orchid got back together in 2024 after a similarly long time spent dormant. Jerome's Dream have actually released 2 more records since they reunited in 2018, while Page 99 have reformed 3 times for one-off shows and tours since 2011. Don't bet against them doing it again. I wear black on the outside because black is how I feel on the inside. Pretty emo, right? You cry out in your sleep, all my feelings exposed. There's a taste in my mouth, as desperation takes hold. Yep, classic emo right there. Except the first lyric is from British indie band The Smiths, and the second is from their Manchester counterparts, Joy Division. Neither of them are really what you call emo, but both helped to shape the sounds that would come decades later. Wearing Smiths and Joy Division tees, and maybe The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen too, became part of the whole emo look in the early 2000s. Artists name-checked these 1980s influences from across the pond, particularly Brand New's Jesse Lacey. Part of this was down to the impact that Donnie Darko had, the 2001 movie that laid some of the groundwork for 21st century emo, and really leaned into all that British music from the 1980s. Like I mentioned earlier on, I've got a video on this too if you want to check it out. But mainly, this was because the music was so good, and it really tapped into the melancholic, angsty vibe of the emo scene. Emo doesn't always get the credit it deserves, musically. Maybe it's the fact that there were just too many emo-by-numbers bands for a while, bands who made derivative tunes that didn't really add anything to the genre. But this isn't fair. Once you delve a little deeper, you find incredible experimentation and some amazing sounds. Look at Circle Takes the Square, a progressive emo behemoth who produced astonishingly inventive compositions and intense musical experiences. 2004 LP As the Roots Undo offers a screamo take on the cinematic post-rock of Godspeed, You Black Emperor, and Silver Mount Zion. And how about Idiot Pilot? The chaotic digital hardcore of their Strange We Should Meet Here album sounds like Radiohead asked Thrice to sit in on their Kid A sessions. Thrilling, awesome stuff. I already talked about screamo and emo, and how the 2 terms are not exactly one and the same. But it's hard to ignore that screamed vocals have played a big part in the genre over the years. And it's also hard to ignore the damage that screaming can do to the old vocal cords. From Dance Gavin Dance on the Warped Tour in 2011, to Alexis on Fire's last tour before their hiatus, vocalists have experienced high-profile on-stage blowouts after years of heavy screaming. Avenged Sevenfold's M Shadows was even rumored to have been forced to quit screaming after undergoing throat surgery, although this turned out to be false. And when bands do leave the screaming behind for something more clean, the fan reaction is often not great. British band Funeral for a Friend experienced a bit of backlash when they released their more melodic second album Hours in 2004, although fans have since embraced this record as a classic. In around 2010, emo kids suddenly had an awakening. Sure, metallic post-hardcore arrangements, rough vocals, and fast-paced punk-inspired tracks are cool, but you know what else is cool? Smashing Pumpkins. The grunge revival spread like wildfire through the emo community. Suddenly, punk and hardcore bands like Title Fight were producing dreamy, 90s-style soundscapes and slow, drawn-out chord progressions. Groups like Basement, Pity Sex, Citizen, and Turnover poured their heart and soul into music drenched in feedback, sounding like My Bloody Valentine and Dinosaur Jr. reimagined for a new generation. It was a bit of a fad, but it was a really good fad while it lasted. Check out some of those names if you haven't already. New Jersey band Trophy Scars had all the ingredients to be absolutely massive. They had smart lyrics, expert musical compositions, and just the right balance of hardcore weight and melodic beauty. Between 2003 and 2006, they dropped the Hospital Music for the Aesthetics of Language and Goodnight Alchemy EPs, and the Alphabet's full length. Each of these recordings could have been one of the biggest records of a generation, and yet each received just a limited release and barely made a mark. I'm kind of getting at a broader point here. Trophy Scars are not unique. There are hundreds of bands just like them, artists who created something jaw-droppingly beautiful that almost no one will ever hear. Perhaps this is the true essence of emo. It was never about a grab for mainstream success, a cynical move towards the big bucks. Instead, it was, and is, and always will be, about the purity of emotional expression. So thanks to Trophy Scars, who are still around by the way, and thanks to all the other greatest bands you never heard of. And thanks to you too, of course. You stayed with me on this journey down to the very deepest reaches of the genre we all love, and you lived to tell the tale. Talking of tales, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of great stories I've missed out here. There's just so much to cover. Let me know what you think I should have included in the comments below. And like, subscribe, and stick around for another deep dive coming right up.